The sun had been rising for hours, casting a golden glow over the endless fields. Dust hung in the air, and every movement seemed heavier under the scorching heat. A woman worked tirelessly under the sun, her skin glistening with sweat. She had been at it since early morning, tending to the crops, fixing fences, and moving heavy bundles of hay. Each task was exhausting, yet she did not stop. She had grown up on this land and had always taken pride in her ability to work hard. But today the sun seemed stronger, the wind drier, and her energy thinner than ever. Her clothes clung to her skin, soaked in sweat, and she had long since removed her jacket to make the work slightly easier. Despite the relief, the heat was relentless, and her body was beginning to feel its limits. She moved slowly, each step deliberate, each breath measured. Her hands were raw from labor, her muscles aching with every motion, yet there was a quiet determination in her eyes. She would not give up. She could not. There was too much to do, and she had always been proud of facing challenges alone. Across the field, a cowboy worked nearby. He had noticed her earlier in the morning, moving from task to task without pause. He admired her strength and dedication, but he could also see the strain in her movements, the subtle wobble in her step, and the faint pallor of her face. He was a man who understood hard work. He had grown up on the range and knew the value of endurance, but he also knew when someone was pushing themselves too far. He had seen it before in men and women alike, and he knew it could become dangerous if not addressed in time. As the day wore on, the woman continued her chores, unaware of the warning signs her body was giving her. She bent to lift a heavy sack of grain, her muscles trembling with the effort. Sweat ran down her back, soaking her shirt. She paused for a moment, trying to catch her breath, but the relentless work called her back immediately. She pushed herself forward, ignoring the fatigue that pressed against every fiber of her being. Her pride would not allow her to rest until the tasks were done. The cowboy had been watching quietly from a distance, giving her space but staying alert. He knew the moment when pride could become harmful, and he could sense it approaching. He adjusted his hat against the sun and started walking toward her, his boots crunching softly against the dry soil. The woman did not notice him at first. Her focus was entirely on the work at hand. She moved with precision, stacking hay carefully, pulling weeds from the dry earth, and repairing broken fences with steady hands. But each movement took more effort than the last, and the color in her cheeks was fading beneath the sweat and exhaustion. Suddenly she stumbled. Her knees buckled slightly under her weight, and she grabbed at the nearby fence to steady herself. She had almost lost her balance several times before, but this time her body gave out completely. She collapsed onto the ground, her hands pressing into the dry soil, her face down and half buried in the dust. Her breathing was shallow, rapid, and uneven. The heat and exhaustion had finally taken their toll. The cowboy reached her quickly, his long stride carrying him across the field. He knelt beside her without hesitation, his eyes scanning her carefully to assess her condition. She was unconscious, her body limp and her skin hot to the touch. He knew he had to act immediately. Carefully, he lifted her gently, feeling the weight of her exhaustion in his arms. It was not light, but he had handled livestock heavier than this many times before. He spoke softly to her as he moved, his voice calm and steady. "Let me shoulder this with you," he said quietly, almost as if he were speaking to himself. "You don't have to do this alone." There was no judgment in his tone, no condescension, only a simple offer of help. The woman, too tired to respond, let him guide her toward the shade of a nearby tree. The ground beneath the tree was cooler, the air slightly less oppressive, and a small stream ran nearby, offering fresh water. The cowboy laid her down carefully, ensuring she was comfortable and safe. He ran water over her hands and face, letting the coolness soothe her burning skin. As she slowly regained consciousness, her eyes fluttered open, blinking against the bright sunlight. She looked around, disoriented at first, but then recognized the cowboy sitting beside her. His presence was steady and reassuring, a quiet strength that made her feel safe. She wanted to apologize for collapsing, for needing help, but no words came out. She was too tired, and the simple act of breathing felt like an accomplishment. The cowboy smiled gently, understanding her hesitation. He did not press her with questions or scold her for overworking herself. Instead, he offered a cool drink of water, helping her sit up and supporting her as she regained her balance. She accepted it slowly, sipping carefully, feeling the refreshment travel through her body. For the first time that day, she felt a sense of relief, a break from the relentless pressure she had been carrying alone. They stayed under the tree for a while, The cowboy spoke in quiet tones about the importance of taking care of oneself, about knowing when to rest, and about the value of asking for help. The woman listened, initially quietly, then with more attention, realizing that there was truth in his words. She had always believed she had to handle everything on her own, but now she saw that accepting help did not make her weak. It made her stronger, more resilient. After some time, the woman felt strong enough to stand. The cowboy helped her to her feet and she took a deep breath, feeling the cool air fill her lungs. Her muscles still ached, but the immediate danger had passed. She looked at the cowboy and finally spoke, her voice soft but sincere. "Thank you," she said. I didn't realize how close I was to falling completely." He nodded, a small smile on his face. "Everyone needs someone to lean on sometimes. You don't have to carry everything by yourself." That moment became a turning point for her. It was not just about the physical support he had given her, but the emotional reassurance that came with it. She realized that strength was not only in enduring hardship alone, but in recognizing when to accept kindness from others. The cowboy, in his quiet and steady way, had shown her that compassion was a strength, not a weakness. As the sun began to move lower in the sky, casting longer shadows across the field, the woman slowly began to recover her energy. The cowboy stayed nearby, offering support when needed, but giving her space to regain her independence. They worked side by side, carefully balancing the chores, and the woman began to feel a sense of camaraderie that she had never experienced before. She was no longer alone in her struggle. Someone had shared the burden with her. By the time the day was nearing its end, the woman felt a renewed sense of purpose. The exhaustion had not disappeared entirely, but it was tempered by the realization that help could come in unexpected ways. The cowboy had not forced himself upon her life. He had simply offered support when it was most needed, and she had accepted it quietly, gratefully, and without shame. As they walked back toward the farmhouse together, she glanced at him with a mixture of respect and gratitude. He had not only helped her that day, but had also taught her a valuable lesson about human connection, about trust, and about the quiet power of compassion. She knew that she would carry that lesson with her, long after the sun had set and the fields were quiet once again. And in that moment, under the fading light of the day, the woman understood that even the strongest among us sometimes need someone to shoulder the burden, if only for a little while. It was a simple act, but its impact was profound. And as they disappeared into the warmth of the evening, both of them carried with them the knowledge that shared effort, empathy, and understanding could transform even the hardest of days into something meaningful. The next morning, the sun rose gently over the fields, painting the sky with soft shades of pink and orange. The air was cooler than the previous day, and a light breeze carried the scent of fresh earth and growing crops. The woman stepped outside her small farmhouse, stretching her tired muscles. She could still feel the soreness from yesterday's collapse, but her spirit felt lighter. She had learned something important. She did not have to face every challenge alone. The cowboy was already outside, preparing tools for the day's work. He noticed her coming out and gave a small nod, a silent acknowledgement that he was there to help if she needed it. The woman approached him, her steps more steady than before. She was grateful for his presence, but also determined to regain her own strength. Together they began the day's tasks, moving carefully through the fields, repairing fences, and tending to the crops. This time the work felt different. She no longer carried the weight of pride and isolation that had made the labor so exhausting yesterday. Now there was a sense of partnership. When a heavy bundle of hay needed moving, he helped lift it with her, and they shared the effort without words. When she bent to fix a fence post, he handed her the tools she needed, his movements smooth and practiced. The rhythm of cooperation settled over them like a comforting blanket, making even the hardest work seem lighter. As the morning passed, the woman felt her energy returning. She had learned to pace herself, to take breaks when needed, and to accept help without feeling ashamed. The cowboy did not rush her or make her feel weak. Instead, he encouraged her quietly, letting her regain her strength at her own pace. By mid-morning, she was able to work for longer stretches without feeling overwhelmed, and the confidence in her movements began to return. They paused for a short break under the shade of a large oak tree. The woman drank water and wiped her face with a cloth, noticing how different it felt to rest with someone nearby who genuinely cared. The cowboy sat beside her, offering a quiet smile and a nod of reassurance. They did not need many words. The shared understanding between them was enough. She realized that strength did not only lie in working alone, but in knowing when to lean on others. After the break, they moved to the fields that were furthest from the farmhouse. The work here was more demanding, with uneven ground and heavy soil. The woman lifted bundles of harvested crops while he carried the heavier loads, and together they made steady progress. There was a rhythm to their work, almost like a silent conversation. She began to notice details she had missed before, the way the soil held water, the patterns in the crop rows, and even the songs of birds nearby. Life, she realized, was easier to notice when shared with someone else. Throughout the day, small gestures strengthened their bond. He would hand her a tool when her hands were full, offer advice on the best way to lift a heavy load, or simply stand nearby when she needed support. She responded in kind, learning to trust him and appreciating his calm, steady presence. By evening, the work that had seemed impossible yesterday was nearly complete, and she felt a quiet pride in what they had accomplished together. As the sun began to lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the field, they paused to rest. The woman leaned against the fence, breathing deeply, feeling the satisfaction of hard work paired with the comfort of companionship. She realized that the cowboy's presence had changed more than just the labor. It had changed her perspective on life. She no longer felt that she had to shoulder every burden alone. Life could be shared, and strength could come from cooperation as well as endurance. In the days that followed, their routine settled into a comfortable rhythm. The woman continued her work on the farm, but she no longer pushed herself to the point of collapse. She learned to listen to her body, to recognize her limits, and to accept help when needed. The cowboy remained a quiet presence, ready to assist without judgment, and she found that their shared efforts brought both efficiency and comfort. The farm began to thrive in a way it never had before, not because of individual strength alone, but because of teamwork, understanding, and mutual support. The woman also began to notice changes in herself beyond the physical. She felt more patient and compassionate, not only toward herself but toward others around her. She learned that offering and accepting help could strengthen relationships, and that true resilience came from the balance between independence and interdependence. The cowboy's simple act of support had become a lesson in humility, trust, and human connection. One afternoon, as they worked side by side in the fields, the woman looked at the cowboy and smiled. "I never realized how much easier life can be when you have someone to share it with," she said quietly. He nodded, a small knowing smile on his face. "It doesn't mean you are weak," he replied. "It means you are wise enough to know that life is better when burdens are shared." From that day onward, the woman carried that lesson with her. She approached her work with renewed strength, knowing she could rely on others when needed. She also found herself noticing the needs of those around her, offering help where she could, inspired by the kindness she had received. The community slowly took notice of the change in her, and a quiet spirit of cooperation began to grow among her neighbors. Even the simplest acts became meaningful. She helped a neighbor carry water, assisted a friend in repairing a fence, and shared her knowledge of the farm with those who were new to the work. She realized that compassion was not limited to dramatic gestures. It could be expressed through everyday actions, small moments of attentiveness, and the willingness to shoulder burdens with others. As the seasons changed, the farm continued to flourish. Crops grew strong and healthy, fences remained sturdy, and the work that once seemed impossible was now manageable. The woman and the cowboy continued their partnership, not as equals in rank but as equals in effort and understanding. Their days were filled with labor, yes, but also with quiet satisfaction, laughter, and shared moments that made the work feel lighter and life feel fuller. One evening, as the sun set in brilliant colors across the horizon, the woman sat on the porch of the farmhouse reflecting on the journey she had taken. She thought of the day she collapsed from exhaustion and of the quiet cowboy who had offered his help without judgment. That simple act had changed her life. She had learned to accept assistance, to value connection, and to find strength not only in herself but in the support of others. She realized that life was full of challenges, and hard work would always be part of it. But she also understood that facing those challenges did not have to be a solitary endeavor. Compassion, empathy, and teamwork could transform even the most difficult days into moments of growth and connection. And in the presence of someone who genuinely cared, she had discovered the beauty of shared effort, the power of understanding, and the quiet joy of human kindness. By the time darkness fell, the farm was calm and peaceful. The woman felt a deep sense of fulfillment. She knew that the work would continue tomorrow and the day after, but she no longer feared exhaustion or solitude. She had learned the value of sharing burdens, of leaning on others when needed, and of offering support in return. The cowboy, sitting quietly nearby, shared that understanding without words, his presence a steady reminder that life's challenges were easier when faced together. As the stars began to twinkle in the night sky, the woman smiled softly. She had discovered that true strength was not in carrying everything alone, but in knowing when to let someone walk beside you, shoulder to shoulder, and with that knowledge, she felt ready for whatever the next day would bring, confident that she would never have to face life's trials alone again.